Well, good evening. I'd like to call the to order the Transportation Commission meeting for June 21st, 2012. Roll call, please.
Here.
Member Braden? Here. Member Franzen? Here. Member Iyer? Member Janovi? Here. Member LaForce?
Here.
Member Nelson?
Here.
Or Chair Nelson? Member Schweiger? Member Thompson? Here. Member Whited? Here.
All right, thank you. We'll move for approval of the meeting agenda. I have one thing I'd like to move forward on that. It would be the streetcar presentation for the Transportation Options Working Group. If we could just bring that to the forward, and just after, we'll do the approval of minutes first, but if we could bring that right after that, if there's any objection to that. Okay, could I have a motion to approve that? Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. We'll have approval of the minutes then of the regular meeting of June 21st. So we can do these independently. But there's also one for the special meeting of July 9th. Are there any comments on those minutes?
Should we do one at a time?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, let's do the June 21st first then.
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Then the special meeting that we had on July 9th. Look for a motion to approve those.
I have an edit.
Okay.
On page 3 of the minutes, the fourth paragraph from the bottom, a comment from me commenting about how land use and transportation are intertwined. And if I'm remembering right, I think that was a lead-in to conclude that I feel there's a need for the ETC and the Planning Commission to be collaborating in a more formal way. I don't think we'll get the results that we're seeking if we don't also address land use policies in the city.
So strike the intertwined piece.
Well, it's only to add the second, I guess, the
Okay.
second statement, which is that I believe the ETC and the Planning Commission should be collaborating in some sort of formal way.
Okay.
We want that reflected in the minutes.
Commissioner?
On the first paragraph under France Avenue intersection enhancements, second line, where it says option 3 was assumed in the cost of the feasibility report. Let's see. Which requires minimal right-of-way. So I wonder if that is what is intended, because option 3 requires significant. No. Never mind. I must be mistaken on that one. All right, never mind. Strike that.
But it may be the Bike Boulevard piece you're questioning, because it did not include.
Option 3 was assumed in the cost of the feasibility report. No, I think it means the funding application, not the feasibility report, because option 1 was the cost in the feasibility report. Okay, I see Chuck nodding. So I think the feasibility report should be changed to funding application?
It wasn't exactly option 3, but it was closer to that, because we didn't have anything on France Avenue.
Okay.
We can find the application.
So, okay, how about if it says, said something closer to option 3 was assumed in the cost of the funding application, which requires minimal right-of-way. Does that make sense to people? And then the second paragraph from the bottom, that's when I asked about the specific elements in the bicycle intersections. And it says, they're being proposed are recommended by a group for further evaluation. If we could replace by a group with FHWA, International Programs, I think it's called. That's the reference. That's all I had.
I do have one other change. Sure.
Okay, if you go on page 3, in the middle of the page, you'll see it starts with member Whited. It just simply states, I suggested talking to businesses about sponsoring benches along the corridor. I believe I also went with that was about, have we talked to the businesses about the suggested plan of moving businesses closer to the street and coordinating with them for the redesignment of this whole plan?
Okay, did you get that, Sharon? Thank you. Any other comments?
Oh, I do have one comment. That is, you did say that, and that's reflected somewhere else in the minutes. It's
Oh, I'm
reflected
sorry.
at the bottom of page 2, where it says, Member Whited asked if the businesses have been told that they are to get closer to France Avenue. Is that sufficient?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion or comments? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve? Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. And we have, we're going to skip down to number 6C 4A. And Andy Brown is here to talk to us a little bit about the streetcar presentation that he has. And this is under the Transportation Options Working Group. So I'll turn it over to Andy right now.
Hello. My name's Andy Brown. I'm a longtime Edina resident. I live at 5512 Park Place. Been here for 25 years. And I'm, like you mentioned, I'm on the Transportation Options Working Group. I volunteered for that. And in front of you is a proposal for an idea for a streetcar system for the eastern and southeastern side of Edina. I think the first thing that I'd like to just say is part of the reason for this is how we differentiate Southdale from any other retail or business area, whether that be Eden Prairie or Minnetonka or Ridgedale or the Mall of America. And that was part of the reason, for the idea is how do you make that, it's becoming a more urban environment, and how do we support that from an infrastructure and transportation mindset. So I'll walk you through this. Big chunk of this is based on Portland's experience, Portland, Oregon's experience with a streetcar setup that they've put in and worked with the local and county and federal authorities on. So a potential streetcar structure map could be a loop, essentially a 3-loop tier. Excuse me, sorry. Southdale Mall and Centennial Lakes along being the southern part of the loop, a northern loop running up towards 44th and Grandview along France and the frontage road for Highway 100, and then a potential loop to the airport down 66th Street. So it'd be a relatively simple system, but would essentially get most of the commercial areas in Edina on one universal loop and connect to the airport and onto light rail. Benefits for the city of Edina and the Edina community: allows for one parking stop access to almost all of Edina's commercial districts: Centennial Lakes, Southdale, 44th, 50th, and Grandview. Thank you. Allows for less parking ramp land use and increases land space for business growth. So we were going through the whole rigmarole of what do we do with parking ramps and where do we put them and how tall and all this other stuff. This kind of lessens the burden, hopefully, on having to commit to those kind of resources. Gives business a firm commitment that transportation will be present in Edina for the long term, no matter the situation at Southdale Shopping Mall. I think one of the things at the city council meeting that I heard is that, and maybe this has changed, and I don't know the situation on that, but the parking ramp park and ride, if Southdale ever changes to more residential or is not a destination shopping district, that Met Council and Met Transit have the right to pull out of that. This would give a more fixed usage for that structure if that goes on. Decreases employee and customer spending on vehicle expenses, allows for greater personal spending on other items. We're all in tight times. And so, if you have to spend less on car insurance or vehicle repair, and you can get to the grocery store and you can get to the airport, you don't need to spend as much to get around. Gives Edina businesses and community access to the airport, downtown Minneapolis and St. Paul, the new revamped St. Paul train depot, fast train service to potentially Duluth, Rochester, and Chicago, depending on how those developments go at the federal level. But you wouldn't necessarily have to get into a car to get to those places. You could get on this transit loop and then get to where you need to go. You'd never have to take a car. Long-term potential decrease in travel expense for businesses, obviously Fairview, Southdale, and others. They do car rentals, airfares, employee mileage reimbursement, hotel stays. So they could become more efficient. It could be a more desirable spot for more businesses in the area. Increase overall health in the community, decreases greenhouse emissions, increases public desire to walk and bike, especially if the bike racks are inside the streetcar. Easier to understand route access for senior citizens, no steps needed to access streetcar. It's all at curb grade level in Portland, so there's no 1, 2, 3 steps up to get to the bus, to the main level or anything like that. It's all on one grade curb level. And increases ability to city to handle major events such as the Edina Art Fair, major golf tournaments, potentially at Interlochen, without harming neighborhoods. You'd have a more organized way of getting people to major destinations within the city. Links to the greater rail and transportation infrastructure. This is right out of the Midwestern HSR.org website. And basically these are the proposed passenger routes or potential routes that they're looking at as far as high-speed rail goes. And if you had a streetcar setup, you could then link into that through the light rail on 55 right now. So you have access to other areas, Rochester, the Mayo Clinic, Duluth, Fargo potentially, and so forth, Chicago. There's major infrastructure investments and goals from what I understand for 2016. Hennepin County and City of Richfield is looking to repair 66th Street from the Edina border to the airport, and that's in planning. It could go all at once, it could go in stages. City of Edina's capital plan, I understood that we're budgeting to replace the France Avenue Bridge over 62 in case MnDOT doesn't have the finances for that. But how do we support the capital structure investments that enable long-term, integrated streetcar system between Southwest Rail and Hiawatha Light Rail? How could we do that, do those investments so we don't preclude them from ever being done in the future? How do we influence the design on those above investments to be streetcar ready if that's what we want for the long term? Like I said, this is kind of based on what Portland has gone through. Use them as an example. Depending on where you look at, when they did the project, they did it in phases. So if you look at total spend, their system size is roughly, from the last that I could hear, is 3.35 miles on a double track, which is 7 miles in total roughly. Their total spend is $148 million so far, and their federal spend is $75 million of that. Local spend, which comes from many, many local sources, $73 million. So that was county, city, businesses, different organizations. And the benefits that they realized were convenient and attractive transportation alternative, fits the scale and traffic patterns of existing neighborhoods, provided quality service to attract new transit ridership, and reduced shorter intercity auto trips, parking demand, something I think Edina's been going through substantially, and traffic congestion and air pollution. It encouraged development of more housing and business in the central city. Sort of, that got me flowing with what's going on with Southdale. It's becoming a more urban area. And for better or for worse, we're investing in Southdale to keep it and make it better, and it's kind of gotten on hard times, and this is a way to try and improve that as well. Talked to a number of individuals basically to try and figure out how is this even all done, what would you do, how would you do it, what does it take. Spoke to a gentleman down in Chicago with the FTA, Federal Transportation Administration, gave me a number of ideas. Obviously, I'm just an individual, so I was basically a fact-finding, gathering information. So these are some of the sites where you can go to get grants and where to find information and who to contact and that sort of thing. This is the list of, I got some of the information from United Streetcar. They're based in Portland. They're kind of like a conglomerate, like General Electric in a way. And they own the Oregon Iron Works, and they're the only producer of US-based streetcars, which qualify them for the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. So they own a license from Skoda in Czechoslovakia, well, former Czechoslovakia, Czech nation, and they've taken that license and use that to produce cars here. And this is some of their material. I can dive into further, but just be open for any questions or so forth. So,
Well, thanks, Andy. Yeah, are there, go ahead.
I have a question. What year did they put this in place in Oregon?
I know it started roughly right around 2008, I think, is when they were really doing it, along with the Obama administration. So they had been thinking about it way earlier than that, but they really didn't start producing, track and putting down major investment until right around there, 2008.
Have they since done a customer satisfaction or anything, follow-up survey or any sort?
I couldn't find anything online
Okay.
regarding that. It was basically more promotional material regarding what they're doing at the federal level and at the state level and the city level for that organization.
Thank you.
Just to clarify for myself and the viewers, this would be on street
Yes.
in mid-traffic flow. So
On
this
street,
is-
mid-traffic flow,
So
correct.
it'd be, basically down France Avenue.
Yep, it would be, they'd have to follow the same traffic rules as any vehicle does right now. That's the way it's set up in Portland as well. One of the benefits is that because you're at street level, because you're at street grade, it's not the same of right-of-way access that you'd need for a light rail line. Light rail lines go for $1 billion or so, a pop. This, on average, goes for 20% of that, 20 to 15% of that, and that's because you are on street level and you are, on the lanes.
Got it. Thank you.
What are how many miles are in this plan?
Well, each loop there on page 2, the red loop is roughly 6.5 miles
Oh, there
by
you have it. I'm
by
sorry.
Google,
Yeah.
and the orange loop is 3.3, and the green line is 3.6. I mean, if you take the Portland example, they've done it in an incremental way. They've done one line at a time where they think it's beneficial, and not try to go for the whole kit and caboodle all at once, right? They've gone and said, okay, is this more beneficial, and try to build up ridership as they go.
Right.
Get
And
people
so
used to it.
we have roughly double or you're showing on this map roughly double what Portland's done
Yeah,
today.
and no one's suggesting that, this is
Correct.
just an idea. I mean, it's basically, what could you do with that, and what would be most important, so.
I have a few questions. Any mass transport, I mean, this is going to be capable of carrying a lot of people?
Yeah, it has roughly the same size as the bus system right now, as far as, not the extended bus, but it handles anywhere between 25 to 45 people, depending on who's standing and who's sitting and the handicap situation on the car.
So, the reason I ask that is that a lot of these projects have to be justified based on the number of people who are going to
Yeah.
use it,
Yep.
based on populations.
Yeah.
Do you think that the city of Edina, with the population and the population that goes and uses Southdale, would justify an investment that is a fairly big number?
I mean, I think so. I mean, especially if you look at the long-term growth. I mean, we've already authorized height, in the Southdale area. This is obviously not something that's going in tomorrow. You're looking 10, 15 years down the line. And, getting the federal funding and the local funding and the, private funding. I mean, this is not just going to be, if this were to go forward, you've got to ask the Fairview Southdales of the world to contribute. This is going to help their employees. So it's what is the level of development in that area going forward.
So follow up on that, the other thing is some of the goals of such an investment would be congestion reduction and things like that. If it's going to be on the street, I'm not so sure we have a congestion problem that we're trying to solve, and I'm also, and to tell you the truth, I'm not really sure what the issues that could be during winter and snow, off time, if you're supporting businesses at Southdale with something of this magnitude, is it going to be used during the daytime, during business hours, when people are probably not going to Southdale as much as during evening and weekend? These are the kind of questions
Yeah,
I'd like
I mean,
answers for.
you know, that's something that's gonna have to be looked into. I mean, you know, this is just an idea.
Yep.
You know, I mean, you know, it's try to be a concise proposal of what you could potentially do. You know, as far as supporting the businesses, I mean, anything that is of this magnitude, you're gonna have to run, you know, at pretty much all hours except for the evening, right? Except for late night, that sort of thing, just to justify the expense for it. But I mean, I think, you know, as far as congestion goes, I mean, France Avenue is pretty congested right now. You know, it's pretty busy. There's a lot of people going back and forth, and you know, at the same time, we want to have business successful in that corridor, and maybe even attract more business to that corridor.
One last question. Do we have any feedback from the businesses at Southdale? Would they be interested in something like this?
I did talk to Rob Grumman about a month back, and he's right there. So, and they did express, you know, an interest in looking to evaluate it and see what it would be. And you're more than welcome to come up and speak to what your interest might be in it. Thanks, Rob. Good to see you.
Hi, my name is Rob Grumman. Actually here, my real job is I'm one of the administrators at Fairview Southdale Hospital, but I'm also this year the board chair for the Chamber of Commerce in Edina. And Andy brought this proposal forward, and Ari Larson, who is our outgoing president, and myself, we met with him, and intrigued enough to volunteer that we were going to get a business group together, or a group of businessmen together, to look at the merits of this and see whether or not there really would be a need for this long term. So a lot of proof of concept yet to be done and that sort of thing, but certainly intriguing enough that we should certainly take a look at it. So that's our interest in it.
Thanks.
I have a process question that kind of answered a bit of it. So this is being looked at in the Transportation Options Working Group. And so would that group be a point of contact for the business group that is looking at this? Or, I mean, now that we've heard this, is the thought to encourage continuation of looking at it in transportation options, or is it something that you want brought to the full ETC from now on?
I guess that would depend on what, you know, what Rob's group comes back with to make sure that they're on board, and I don't know, Courtney, whatever you think's best.
Yeah, we're happy to work with anybody. Our intent was really just to pull folks in the business community and look at this and see whether or not there was merit to it, and provide some feedback to Andy over time, and which he in turn could then bring back to you. So we're happy to work with anybody. We're just sort of looking at it in terms of whether or not this makes some sense for the community.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner?
Yes, a rail project of this magnitude would need to be included in the regional transitway plan.
Yep.
And especially if you're going to pursue any sort of federal funding, it would have to be in that, and it's not in it. And just looking quickly, I'm not quite sure how it would link to these other rail lines that you're discussing, such as the Southwest. And I was wondering, have you had any conversation with the regional transit planners in the area?
No, I mean, this is
Council.
my communication and conversation has basically been a fact-finding, kind of gathering information. As far as linkage, you could, you know, 66th Street runs directly into the airport property across Highway 77. So if you take that straight down, that would get you eventually to the Highway 55 Hiawatha Light rail line. You'd have to work with MAC, of course, it's their land, and what they're going to do with it. From a perspective of Southwest Light Rail, you would probably have to work with St. Louis Park some way, in shape or form, you know, to figure out how that would work, whether that's a little extension on the Dan Patch corridor, or whether that's up France Avenue, onto Excelsior. But the ability to do that is not, you could potentially do that. understood that it's, I think part of the reason we did this way is that unlike the traditional funding models, we're going to need, economic and non-economic support from the business community. So that's going to be important. And so if they're not on board, then, it'd be very hard to justify, trying to push to get it on any federal register or on through the regional groups. So, I think that was the kind of reasoning behind that is Andy Brown is not going to be able to go get, a transit system put in just because he would like it put in, right? We've got to have people behind us that say that this is something that we need as a business organization to support our employees and our customers and that sort, and don't bother the federal authorities and the regional authorities until we have, some inertia behind us before we go that way.
Right. Well, thanks, Andy, for your presentation. Thanks. And I think we'll, with Jennifer's question, I think we'll leave it in the options area for now. And I think it was valuable for the public to see, and I appreciate your diligent work on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I did, not that I skipped over, but we are now at community comment. Is there anybody that would like to make a comment to the Transportation Commission from the community? Seeing nobody jumping right up, I will we'll skip over that. And then into the Traffic Safety Committee report of July 11th.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to point out, and I apologize for it, but we did not put in the temporary speed table update, so I'd like to pull that from the traffic safety report.
Okay.
And bring that back at the next month's.
Thank you. Commissioner Genevieve.
Yeah, I have a question on section A, number 2. First, a clarification. It says that the request was brought to the Traffic Safety Committee to review recommendations by ETC. Actually, I'm the one who contacted the planner about this, so maybe it should say a member of the ETC.
Sure.
For clarification. I really appreciate that the Traffic Safety Committee looked at this and modified what was proposed in the construction management plan. I have a couple of questions. I assume that the parking will only be allowed where parking is allowed. I mean, that seems so common sense, but doesn't say it in the construction management plan. And also, I assume that will be restricted to those hours when street parking is allowed, and I don't know what those are, but.
That is correct. The on-street parking will be allowed to the hours throughout the year, so from November 1st to April 15th, I believe, is no parking overnight on the city streets, or parking if we have a snowfall event, then a 6-hour limit typically on a roadway also.
So if some way that could be worked into the construction management plan, because this is a completely standalone document, and I don't think we can expect that contractors will be going to look in an entirely different part of the code for the restriction. So it would limit it to 6 hours, subject to all other parking restrictions. And then I still have a concern about the 12-foot area, because this could be 6 hours a day for 4 months, and somebody's street could go down to 12 feet. And I guess because in my neighborhood, there's a lot of construction, I'm aware of how this does affect traffic patterns and affects pedestrians and bicyclists who have nowhere else to go. So I'm a little concerned about the 12-foot wide, and wonder if that really is sufficient in all possible cases.
I guess I'd have to bring that back to the group. Because this document was, if I can go back, and I was hoping that we would have put a copy of this document in the packet also, but this was actually been generated internally by staff to essentially what it would be was it'd be a construction management plan that the contractor, typically on a residential reconstruction or big projects on residential properties, is that they would actually post it right out by the right-of-way. So if somebody is walking by, or if a neighbor wants to read what's their management plan, and that would cover restrictions like this that would say how wide the street has to be, where they can park, who to contact if they have questions, meaning which, the contractor's name, right, to get directly into them. And then there's a lot of other things. I would have pulled it up, but our network is down, so I can't pull that up and go through the whole list with you. But so that's kind of the just behind this construction management plan, and that each contractor would have to sign off on it, and they would have to post it on site. As far as the 12-foot wide and such, when you open up a roadway wider, that pushes the cars further into the neighborhood for a project. So that's what you'd have to look at, as if you cannot have parking on both sides on a particular project, how far into the neighborhood are you pushing those workers? And 4 months is, I think some folks would love to have 4 months of construction, but a lot of cases, what we've seen on some of these really large homes is 2 years of construction. And so that's what becomes such an issue in the neighborhood, is having all that construction traffic and parking and things. So I wouldn't have an answer for you tonight as far as width-wise and longevity, how long they could be tying a street up with on-street parking. But I could go back to the group and ask, bring those questions back.
Yeah, I mean, and the other question is the 20-foot, does that 20-foot clearance of the fire code thing, does anybody in the audience know what I'm talking about? There's something in the fire code about needing to keep 20 feet for the travel
Yep.
lane of the road. Does that apply on regular streets too?
Not necessarily, because where the 20-foot comes is if they have to stop the rig and put their outriggers out, they need close to 20 feet. For just traveling down a roadway, you need about 8.5, 9 feet for just traveling down the roadway itself. So if they had an issue where they had to stop the vehicle, put the outriggers out, is that they would locate these the people that are parking there and have those vehicles moved as quick as possible.
Okay. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts about this, but I would just, knowing how much construction traffic impacts neighborhoods and how it leads to other concerns and complaints, this seems like an area of the construction management plan that would benefit from being pretty specific. And I think this is a step in the right direction. But there may be some more questions to handle, I think.
I have one question, similar to you suggest in here, finding off-street parking. Depending on the size of the site, a lot of people just go up into the yard or other areas. Is that where you're looking for off-site, especially in residential? Obviously, driveways and whatnot, but if there's many contractors, does this policy or this plan prohibit going over the city curbs and things like that, or does it not get that specific?
Yeah, there is, if you are parking a vehicle, I mean, you can park it on the construction site itself if you have room on it, but to go on other properties, there is specific language in the code as far as not parking on grass, and you have to have an improved surface itself. What we really encourage people to do, especially on these really large, because some of these homes, I mean, they're equivalent of a small commercial, reconstruction, is actually just shuttle their employees in if they can do that. If they don't need a vehicle that has all the tools in it that they need throughout the day, if they're just laborers or trade people that don't need those tools close by, is shuttle them in from a parking lot somewhere. And that's what we really encourage them to do. What I would probably say, what I'm hearing is possibly maybe we should be bringing this construction management plan to the group, so that the ETC could maybe take a look at it and offer further comments before we finalize it in-house, or do we, or are you?
I mean, I would see value in that if other people are willing to take the time, because of the impact of construction on neighborhood traffic. And it just seems to, the goal is to make these, the goal is to help these projects have less of a negative impact. And so this is our chance to create a document that communicates to contractors what's needed to, keep the neighborhood livable during projects.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll do that.
Any other questions with the traffic safety report?
Move approval with the acknowledgement that the speed table policy will be brought back to us and that the construction management plan will come to us at a later meeting for review.
Okay, any other further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? I need a second, sorry. Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, thank you. The France Avenue pedestrian and bike crossing feasibility study.
Chair and Commission, tonight we're going to be giving a presentation on the intersection enhancements along France Avenue that we've been working on with you and stakeholders group. We had a special meeting a week ago, and we're coming back with a revised option 3, and Chuck will go into that in a minute. And then we're also going to be discussing. We thought it would, with some conversation that the City Council had at their workshop on Tuesday night, is to actually talk a little bit what was in the actual rescoping of the project and what did that actually include under those dollars. So what I'd like to do is just hand over the presentation to Chuck and the team and go through that and then maybe entertain questions possibly after the presentation. There's a lot to get through here, but if we could hold the questions after, I'd much appreciated. With that, I'll hand it over to Chuck Rickert with WSB.
Thanks, Wayne. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, you all know me, I think. My name is Chuck Rickert. I'm with WSB, the project manager for this project. Just, I'll quickly go through some of these initial slides before we get to the revised option 3, but as all you know, the 2007, federal grant application was for a pedestrian overpass bridge. We went through a scope change process to get that change to the intersection enhancements that we are working on right now. We had some direction from City Council. I'll talk a little bit about that. And then we went through the stakeholders group meetings. We had 2 meetings, and then the meeting with yourselves on that special meeting. Again, the project locations, we're looking at 76th Street, the 3 intersections that we're looking at, 76th Street, 66th Street, and 70th Street. And then on the east side, making those sidewalk connections that are missing today. The blue dot there actually shows Gallagher, and that's the location where Three Rivers Park is going to be coming through with their trail in the future. And whatever we do at these intersections, hopefully they'll replicate at that intersection also. We went through the scope change, process again, as I indicated, and what we got approved through the Met Council, was the median, providing median refuge islands, widening that median to provide that refuge in the middle, creating some intersection improvements, again, narrowing the lanes along France Avenue down to state aid minimums to create that widened median and give us a little bit of room on the outside. Also, removing those free right turn lanes, to give us again some shorter crossing distances and so forth. Enhancing the corners, bringing the intersections up to ADA compliant, with new ped ramps and so forth. Providing some pedestrian level lighting at the intersections. Again, doing some signal improvements, through those intersections with APS, countdown timers, some detection for vehicles and bikes, through the intersections. Providing an east-west connection for bicycles at each of the intersections. Not along France, but an east-west connection at each of the intersections. connecting those missing links of sidewalks on the east side only, providing better, transit, accessibility, specifically down at Gallagher, 72nd Street in that area. And then, doing this with minimal or no right-of-way, impacts, except at some of the intersections. This is what was actually presented to the Met Council for that scope change. It was a very generic, drawing. We didn't have survey at the time or anything, so we just basically labeled the intersections. We had no detailed design at that time, so we were just looking at some concepts, some really preliminary concepts at that time. But this shows the intersections and the drawings that we actually presented to them at that time. You can see the sidewalk connections are just a blue dashed line. We had no design at all at that time. So when we estimated the cost for that, we had some assumptions that we used in that. Again, it was based on aerial mapping. We didn't have survey at the time, so we were just going, we didn't have any, vertical, information. It was all just horizontal, based on the aerial. We looked at just a typical intersection design. We didn't look at any, specifics at each intersection. Providing minimal landscaping at these intersections, basically in the median, at the intersections a little bit. Nothing really between the intersections, we were assuming at that time. Again, minimal, lighting in the corridor, and again, no right-of-way. We actually assumed no right-of-way in our cost. This was the cost that was actually presented to the Met Council. Is a little over $2 million, $2,045,000 is what the cost was. And again, you'll see there's no right-of-way included in that cost. So what we've done, since then and since our last meeting is we actually put this design to paper with, our survey information and so forth. And what you see on the screen here shows that, and shows that design with those east-west bike lanes. It shows the connections for the sidewalks, staying within the right-of-way, as much as we could through there, except for at the intersections. Again, this is 76th Street, and you can see that we're matching, and there's an existing sidewalk that this aerial is a little bit old, and that sidewalk doesn't show on the aerial, but there is a sidewalk here that we'd match into, showing a sidewalk all the way along, this area, and then continuing down in front of Macy's, and in front of that existing wall, we would provide a sidewalk again through there. No, we didn't have any room for any boulevards through there because of where the right-of-way was located. So we had no boulevards through that area, although we had no right-of-way impacts you'll see through those areas. And then again, getting to the intersections, we did widen out a little bit where we were able to provide some landscaping or some green area and landscaping. The medians didn't change. The medians were the same as they have been through the options that we've seen earlier. And again, creating that sidewalk connection all the way down in front of Southdale and then connecting up to the intersection at 66th. We then put the cost, a hard cost actually with quantities and so forth here. We did have right-of-way impacts, at the intersections. We had about $500,000 worth of right-of-way. And again, in our estimates that we're assuming it's $35 a square foot for permanent right-of-way, and then some temporary right-of-way at $20 a square foot. And that's, fairly high, estimate. So, our number, looks high, but it's not a real large area that we're actually talking about. But there was some right-of-way impacts. The actual construction costs came down about $200,000 from what we originally estimated. The right-of-way went up, but the construction cost came down, and we came in at about $2.3 million, costing out that what we had proposed in that scope change. After we got that scope change approved, we went to council. Council gave us some direction. One of the directions they gave us was the urban design piece. They wanted a urban design look through this corridor, and the comment that came out was they wanted more than just landscaping. So that was one of the directions that we took through. We hired LHB to help us out with that, as the landscape architect, so they were brought on board to help with that aspect of it. We looked at the corridor to make sure that whatever we did at these intersections could be done at other intersections through the corridor when this was all said and done. So we looked at the entire corridor, and then, a direction of getting that stakeholder input and ETC input. About a month later, we had that first stakeholders meeting, and at that first stakeholders meeting, we talked primarily about elements. We talked about the pedestrian element, the ped element, the bike elements, and the corridors, and in some of those elements, we presented that Dutch design, if you remember, that was showed the how bikes could get through the intersection and provide a separated bike facility within the intersections. And one of the things we heard from that stakeholders group was, the spacing between the road and the sidewalk was important. We needed a space, we needed that buffer in there. So, we took all that in, we developed some options. We came up with 3 different options. We then came to that second stakeholders meeting on the 26th, presented those 3 options to the stakeholders group. The first was the separated ped bike with a boulevard between the ped and the bike, and then another planter strip boulevard between the road and the bike path. Option 2 brought it in a little bit more, where we brought the bike lane and the road a little bit closer together, with a little less. They had a separation, but not as much of a separation. We didn't have as many boulevards. And option 3 had the on-road bike lane all the way along on both France and the side streets. All these had bike lanes on France Avenue at that time. We also looked at several different variations, with the sidewalk connections through the corridor. The option 1 and 2 for the entire length, basically looking from end to end, including in front of Macy's and Byerly's, where there's a little pinch point there with the retaining walls. The other variation was taking that piece out of it for now until they come in to develop. And the last one was just doing a sidewalk connection, similar to what the original scope change was, without any boulevards through there. At that meeting, what we heard was the consensus was option 1. Everybody liked it. We didn't have costs, we didn't have right-of-way impacts at that time, so that was, the consensus based on what you knew at that time. You didn't have that information. Again, and I'm going to quickly go through option 1, just show some of these figures, since it wasn't, we're moving past this, I believe, but this shows the boulevards and the separated bike lane, where we had basically 7 feet of a 5-foot bike lane and a 2-foot buffer, and then a planter area, and then a 7-foot walk, all separated from the road with a 6-foot median between the road and that. And that was assumed for the entire length. And again, these kind of show that option as we went through them. I'll just quickly go through that. This is kind of a close-up of one of the intersection, how the bike lane and the peds would interact together, at that intersection. The bikes were on the inside here, and then the peds were on the outside. We did have a simulation that we did. We did do some, urban design looks of this option, and these show, again, those wider boulevards and the separation between the roads and so forth. And then just a close-up of the intersection of those urban designs. The cost on this one, as all came in extremely high. It was $9 million, for everything we wanted to do. And a large part of that cost was the right-of-way, how much right-of-way we had to take through that corridor. Almost $4.5 million of that cost was actual right-of-way. We then had the special meeting last week, and, we talked about that. Came up with those issues. Of the, that the cost and the right-of-way impacts were too high on that option 1. we kind of went back to the drawing board a little bit, with looking at a revised option 3. And some of the things that, again, we heard was, no bike lanes on France Avenue at this time. So we removed the bike lanes on France Avenue, maintained the east-west connections, the bike lanes as was in the original scope of the project, and then providing that, sidewalk connection again on the east side with a boulevard at that time. So, that's what we came back with as a revised option 3. This shows that section. We ended up with a 8-foot boulevard. Our first iteration actually had a 10-foot boulevard, but the right-of-way impacts were, even more, as you'll see. But that 10-foot boulevard, we did reduce it down to an 8-foot boulevard with an 8-foot walk. All the other elements are similar. On the side streets, we actually went down to a 6-foot boulevard and a 6-foot walk on the side streets, and then the bike lanes are shown there as 5-foot bike lanes on the side streets. And again, this shows the different elements for the entire corridor. In front of the one thing in front of Macy's and Byerly's, we did move the sidewalk up on top of the retaining wall. So we left the boulevard on below and we moved the sidewalk up. So we had a little bit more right-of-way impact through there, but we did move that to maintain a boulevard through there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had any boulevard. So this reflects, those costs reflect actually, moving that sidewalk up on top of that retaining wall. And this again goes through the sidewalk and the boulevards through the corridor. Again, a blow up of the intersection. You can see at the intersections we do, the red line represents the right of way through the corridor. The gray is the sidewalk. So at the intersections we did still have some right of way impacts. The boulevard, the 8-foot boulevards are shown there also. And again, I'm gonna turn it over to Craig and let him kind of go through the urban design features of this option, since you haven't heard this one yet.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you. What we're looking at is based on some of the inputs that we've gotten from all of you and from the community too, on what to do about the streetscape. I want to set the stage though first that the idea here was premised on a lot of your other planning documents related to the community as a whole and France Avenue in particular, and noting that France Avenue is a unique roadway in Edina, not only what it connects, but and how it travels through the whole city, but actually this particular segment next to between 494 and 62. That is a unique width, it's a unique character, it has the potential of becoming a main street for the community. And as such, it's going to create a sense of identity for the whole community. And what elements do we need to be put into that? Now, we have gone through this exercise and we've looked at some of the costs related to a full build-out, if you will. And what we're looking at, is there a way to create an incremental development, something that will not preclude further development along this corridor as it's redeveloped, as it changes its character from essentially a roadway that's devoted to traffic, devoted to cars, to one that's devoted to creating community, one where people are going to be walking up and down the road, one where people might be actually outside using the area adjacent to France Avenue. So what we thought in this particular option that we would be able to do is to create mostly the visible vertical elements. The primary one that we had heard early on and throughout this whole process is the vegetation, is the idea of large trees. So we are looking at adding boulevard trees, not only on the outside of it, but because we're trying to create the ability for a pedestrian to walk through it, actually in the median too. Now, because of some right-of-way constraints here, we think that what we will be able to do, though, is to use some very sophisticated soils, and that's included in the cost estimate that you'll see later. We've called some engineered soils that Edina has used elsewhere within the city successfully. We're also looking at adding, as you can see in this picture, some elements that would be vertical elements, architectural elements, that would allow identification of this corridor. Now, these aren't the gateway monuments that we had talked about at one point at both at 62 and 494, but they would be similar types of monuments that would create a sense of place throughout the corridor. I should have gotten, there we go. So if you look at a particular intersection, what we're looking at again is the opportunity to create these 3 rows of trees, both on the crossroads and on France Avenue. And then specifically at the corners to allow flowers to be planted that would allow something vibrant, something that's going to be noticeable. And then again, the monuments that would be placed there. And there is sufficient room for these items the way that they're being designed. Here's a kind of a bird's eye view of what that might look like. We also have indicated that there would be pedestrian lighting in these along these routes. We're looking at putting the lighting probably on the outside of it, because that's the line that's constant, that stays there. People will see that as it's developed. If we put it in the middle, it wanders back and forth and doesn't create quite the statement that we would have if we can put it on the outside. Here's a detail, and it's going to be a lot in the details. You can see even the paving pattern. We're trying to create something unique. This shows a diamond. Of course, this is just a concept idea, but we try to create something that says to people that you care. Something that's very important in an urban design standpoint is the level of detail that you put into these places. Allow people to recognize that as a community you've said something about that the average person walking here, you think about them, that you care about them, and they return and they respect that sort of effort on the part of the municipality. Here's again just kind of a glimpse of a conceptual idea of what some of those markers might be and how they would relate and identify that particular intersection. You do have some existing opportunities here with existing vegetation and other things that are nearby, trying to pull those in. I think we showed an earlier version. As we work with the developers, what we're trying to do in these particular intersections is set up a vocabulary, if you will, a design vocabulary that will allow people when they do this redevelopment to recognize that, yes, I want to connect to the street. Now, some of these might not be buildings that are going to move out to the edge of the street that we had talked about, but how can we bring the sidewalk to them? And this will be an opportunity to use some of these motifs over and over.
With all that, we did a cost estimate again for that revised option, and we came in at about $5.8 million is what that option, would do. And again, about a little over $2 million of that was right away, and that's reflected in that having that boulevard area and again the urban design piece of it. This kind of shows a comparison between the different options and the scope change, that we had. And again, the original approved scope change at the $2,045,000, and then the revised cost based on that actual design, then going through option 1 and 2. And you can see that the construction costs, piece of this, actually with option 3, isn't too much, over. It's about $400,000 over the original scope, approved scope part of this. So that the additional urban design piece and the right-of-way are, really the primary, factors that, brought this up over that original cost. So, and again, just the schedule that we're on, we're shooting for we need to make a March 31st, 2013 approval for this sunset date. So that is a mandatory piece that we have to do. So with that, I will answer any questions.
Thank you. I think there will be several. Should we just start on one end, or does anybody want to start?
Well, I apologize for missing last week's meeting, but I guess just one kind of technical question, I guess, you're showing 2 feet of, I'll call it excess right away on either side of the road section. and 1 foot on the proposed side streets. I'm just curious if we can take that down to 1 on the main and use that to widen out landscaping within that same corridor?
As far as outside the sidewalk and so forth.
Correct.
Yeah, that could be narrowed up. You know, the one thing that, you know, with the sidewalk, you know, we can do that. With the, if it's classified as a pathway, then we need that two foot, since it's a federal project, we need that 2 foot for clear, you know,
Got it.
clear zone. But I think we can, and that's kind of as a worst case condition at this point, because we haven't had MnDOT, you know, bless that for us yet. We could move that in a foot, you know, if we got that determination from MnDOT.
Would that then in turn save money in right-of-way costs?
Yeah, I mean, a foot across the entire length, yeah.
Okay.
You know, it's not gonna be a ton, but I mean, $150,000, $200,000, I would estimate.
Thank you.
I have one maybe quick question. You have the narrowing of the existing lanes at intersections. That's down to 11 feet. Is it only at the intersections or is it throughout? Would it be striped at 11 feet throughout the corridor?
We, in option 3, we assumed just at the intersections. It would be narrowed up.
So it would widen out
Yep.
to the existing and then narrow each
That's
intersection?
correct, right?
The option 3 revised actually along.
Oh, on the east side, I'm sorry. On the east side, we did, I'm confusing our revised scope one. Yes, on that one, we did, the curb moved on that one out to create a little bit more of a boulevard. So that would create narrower lanes on the east side of the road. On the other side, it wouldn't change. Those would, you know, come back in.
So Chuck,
Well,
Chuck,
east-
the northbound lanes would be reduced in width
Yep,
throughout the corridor. On the southbound lanes, they would only be reduced at the
at the
intersections.
intersections, correct.
Commissioner Janem?
Yeah, looking just at what we're calling option 3, and then maybe later we can go and talk about the revised scope change option. So, for clarification, looking on page 29, where it's in bullet points what the project would include. So it says reducing the vehicle lanes to the minimum state aid requirements, which I'm gonna guess is 11 feet. I don't know. Okay.
11
so
feet,
it's
10
11
feet, depends on what type. Yeah.
But what we just learned is that's not universal. So in some places, it will be reduced to 11 feet, but in other places, it will stay whatever it may be right now, which is maybe 12 feet in some places and 13, is that correct?
On the northbound lanes, they will all be reduced up to the median. So that entire length where we're having the issues, you know, because we're not going to move that center, we're not going to adjust the median only at the intersections. So that curb at the median, we're not removing the curb for the entire length across the median, just at the intersection. So that's a constant. So the lanes get narrower from that point into the, you know, towards off the road, away from the median.
Okay. So the lanes won't be reduced to 11 feet
Northbound.
for the entire corridor?
Northbound,
Northbound, they will be. Southbound, it will only be at the intersections?
correct.
Okay, so, let me make a note there. Widening the center median to 10 feet is only at the intersections?
Yes.
Is that correct? So about how far?
Back toward, probably about the length of, well, you can see on some of these drawings, I don't know if I didn't bring the entire, 300 feet, I guess is
200-300
what.
feet,
yeah.
okay.
Yep.
And then 8-foot landscaped boulevard, 8-foot sidewalk, and then 6-foot landscape boulevard on the side streets and 6-foot sidewalk on side streets. And I looked at an aerial photo today, and it's not clear to me exactly where and for what length this will apply, the 6-foot, because there are existing sidewalks, and in some cases there is existing boulevard. So are you thinking you're going to rip up existing sidewalk to make it uniform? So could you just clarify exactly where the sidewalk and boulevard on the east side will be 6 feet.
Do you want me
On
to
the
go,
side,
do
on the side streets.
you want me to go through each intersection?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would, but.
All right, I don't know if I could get the overhead. We'll have to blow. Either, I guess PowerPoint's fine too. So at 66th Street, we will match into the existing, we'll start on the Point of France side or on the west side there. We will match into the existing sidewalk, you know, at the end of, basically where you can see, you know, where you can see the color change on the screen there. So about, you know, that point. I don't know the exact dimensions right here. Do you know those dimensions, Andy? I don't know. Okay. And then on the east side, again, you know, just through the intersection, you know, 150, 200 feet through the intersection is where we'd match into the sidewalk. On the south side there, we would match in, you know, back about at this point here, you know, down the road. And again, that's where, you know, when we move those curbs and where we, you know, have to have our tapers come back in, that's approximately where that would be. So that's at, and then on the other side, we actually we're matching into it right at the intersection. So what you see in gray is where we would be matching in, or where that gray would end on those drawings, is where we'd be matching in at the sidewalks, at 66th. At 70th, in that northwest quadrant, that's all being done as part of that new development there. So we'll be matching into that there. There actually won't be any boulevard on that side at all, nor will there be on the south side because of the tightness of the corridor with the existing gas station. The sidewalks on the other side, on the east side, we'd be matching in about at the Galleria driveway. Again, you know, we're changing this curb line, you know, narrowing it up the roadway a little bit there. You know, we are creating that boulevard, and that sidewalk would change. Now, once we get into, you know, the detailed design, again, this is, you know, concepts. You know, we're still, we haven't got cross sections yet or anything like that. If we can shorten that up or save pieces of that, we will. And then on the other side, we're matching in right, again, right about at this location here is where we're matching into that sidewalk. Again, providing that a little bit of a boulevard there. And then down at 76th, we are matching in, you know, again, back at this driveway, you know, into, I'm not sure what building that is, but we're matching into that driveway right there. And we're matching in on the other side about at this location. So, you know, just pretty much at the intersection. Again, back at the driveway here, and, you know, also on the other side. You know, where those, basically where the color ends there is where we're assuming that we'd match into the existing, you know, sidewalks.
Okay, thank you for that. So are any of these sidewalks, do they all link up to an existing sidewalk, or is there any place where it will just end?
I believe at, well, on the, let's see which one. I do not believe there's a sidewalk at 66th along this side, so I don't think you know, we're not adding a sidewalk there. So, you know, we're not stubbing out a sidewalk where there's not a sidewalk today, if that's the question.
And then I have a question about the bike lanes on the side streets, and Wayne answered this in an email.
Yep.
But I couldn't, part of it is in the study, the drawing is small,
Yep.
and so it's hard for me to see.
Yep.
So what it looked to me like, and it probably is not the case, but what it looked like is that the bike lanes are being added when there's a right turn lane to get the bikes to the left of the right turn lane. But it wasn't clear to me that they continued on the other side in all cases. And so I wanted to ask you about that.
At 70th Street, you know, or at 76th Street, they do not, you know, this bike lane ends here and does not cross, oh, that one does go through. 70th Street, oh, that, it is there. Yep. Yeah, so at 76th Street, both direction, they go all the way through, yes.
On 76th?
Yes, yep, at 76th. At 70th though, the eastbound, or the westbound, no, I'm sorry, the eastbound one, that does not go through, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, that one.
It's a shared, like, it's like an advisory, it has a share arrows there, just because, you know, it ends at the roundabout on 70th as well.
Yeah.
Prior to that, so we just have an extra wide lane at that location with a sharrow, and then the idea is that the sidewalk, you know, going eastbound is fairly wide, so they'd have to exit at that point, because they can't go through the roundabout, you know, they would be vehicle traffic anyway, going through the roundabouts east on 70th Street as well.
So we'd pull them off after the intersection, onto the sidewalk.
Could we go back to 76? I missed what you said. So is there any way to blow that up?
You know, sure. Can we go to my, that folder? Yep. That here? Am I in the right spot? There it is on top. Okay. Yeah, it'd be option 3. Yep. All right, then I can blow it up. There we go. There.
So the bike lane is in brown?
The bike lanes are in brown, yep.
And so in all cases, what we'll have are bike lanes at the intersections, but not continuing. Because on 76, there are no bike lanes.
Yeah, we're setting it up, again, for the future, you know, when bike lanes would be connected, you know, through the area.
The bike plan has 76 as a secondary route, and so doesn't necessarily call out bike lanes on there. Doesn't mean you can't have them, but it's not part of the bike plan right now. But on 70th, where they are specifically mentioned, they're not being included. And then on 66, they are mentioned in the bike plan.
We're for westbound, they are being included, you know, through the intersection, and it would start just off the roundabout. We would start the bike lane for westbound through the intersection, and again into the gutter here, and then at that point, you know, it would merge into share the road, you know, on 70th Street. Going the other direction, we would have, like Andy indicated, a sharrow, you know, through this way. And again, you know, a lot of it has to do with, you know, what we have on this side. By the time we get to the roundabout here, we need to exit them off, you know, or provide an exit for them, because through the roundabout, they will be in the roundabout, you know, as a bike, just like they are on the other side. So, you know, our thought was we would take them off, you know, at the intersection here, you know, or provide them the opportunity to get off there onto this wider sidewalk through here.
You mean after we get the ordinance changed? To allow that? That's a later discussion. I mean, so that does raise a good point, that, you know, the way we're designing the system doesn't match currently what people are allowed to do in this city. So I think kind of what I'm getting at on this is that when I look at the bullet points on page 29, statements are made, but there's really a lot of detail that needs to be added to those statements. For example, it's not minimum state aid width, the entire length, but it doesn't say that. And it's not 5-foot bike lanes everywhere on the side streets. And when this gets to the council and they're making the hard decision of funding something, I think it needs to be very clear what they're buying. It will matter a lot. And so that clarity, I think, is not here, and even, you know, going through it, it can be a little bit difficult to picture and to understand how it's going to fit in with the larger system, further down on the side streets. So those are my questions on that, and I do have more questions, but I don't want to monopolize this too much.
Anyone else? Go ahead. Tom?
I had a question about the sidewalk along the east side. It shows it as is it a multi-use? Is that?
It's an 8-foot, sidewalk is what we're assuming, yes, multi-use.
And so that's the idea that
Yep.
this can be able to accommodate bicyclists and pedestrians, assuming we can get that thing changed. Okay. And then the second question I had was, I actually liked the idea of bringing people up over the retaining walls. I mean, that seemed like a nice option.
Through here.
Until I was driving down France the other day, looking at it then, and realized there's a pretty nice row of decently mature trees in front of Macy's. And so I'm curious as to, are you taking the whole row of trees out, or would you be able to still go in east of those trees when you're thinking about where that sidewalk's actually going to go?
On top of the,
I mean, the trees are right on top of the retaining wall, and you certainly can't get between the retaining wall and the trees. So it seems like the only viable options are either the trees are coming out or you're able to stay east of them.
we have not got into that detail as far as, the way it's shown right now, they would be coming out with what we have here. If we could work with Macy's and those folks to move the sidewalk over a little bit to save them, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I was wondering where transit shelters might be provided, how many you would see and their location.
We met with Metro Transit, and, they're, at this point in time, they're not proposing to change anything, and that's their purview to, locate those shelters and so forth. The one thing that we talked about with them was the one that is located, it's right in, I believe, right in this area here. They've talked about moving it around to Hazelton, moving that stop around to Hazelton to get it off of France Avenue and to, kind of provide that new stop on that side, where we'd have a lot more opportunity for a shelter on the side there versus, along here. Other than that, we didn't talk about any specific locations with them for shelters.
But they could be, there's room in this design to put them in if.
They would have to be in that median area, that 10-foot or 8-foot median area.
Actually, Boulevard area.
Or Boulevard, excuse me, Boulevard, yeah.
I have just two questions regarding the urban portion, the urban design. On page 31, I just want a clarification of this revised budget. Does it include set-aside money for the gateway monuments, boulevard, median tree plantings, pedestrian lighting, and the paving patterns? So there's like a certain dollar amount that's, set aside for, we have a budget once we get to that portion? Because I remember our conversation was, we wanted those, for example, the gateway monuments, but we didn't want to put them up yet, like mark a spot.
Correct. My understanding is that for this budget, we did put in a $75,000 fee for each monument, and there's 6 of them, correct? So that is a significant amount. And if we did do as you suggested, that we simply indicated that there are future costs that would reduce this cost significantly.
My second question is, especially with those median trees in the middle,
Yes.
About irrigation costs, future care, I'm sure they're not going to look as mature as this where you don't need to water them. Is there like annual costs associated with that?
There is irrigation there is irrigation cost.
Included in this cost?
Included in this, yes.
Great, those were my questions, thank you.
And you're correct, that because this is a reduced area, not only do we need sophisticated soils, which are included in this cost, the irrigation is key. Otherwise, they just, in the weather that we've had, they just bake.
I have one more question that might be brief. In the additional right-of-way taken up with the Byerly's and Macy's, along with Byerly's and Macy's, I like the concept. I'm just wondering if that's been broken out, or you have any idea how much additional right-of-way that piece might have cost?
Well, it'd be approximately 8 to 10 feet, for that entire length. So, I guess I don't know that number right off the top of my head, no. But it's something very
We can
easily
get
to pull
that
up.
for you. I mean, we have it broken out at the office and stuff, but.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like that's a significant amount of right-of-way, and the right-of-way is what seems to be driving this up a little bit. Although I like the idea, if we can address that perhaps in the redesign. I mean, if these properties come up for redesign sometime in the future. and-
Chair Nelson, I have shown this design to the Byerly's folks that are looking at a redesign of their facility. And so got the discussions going on it, and they like the idea of bringing it up and having it, on top of the wall. So if the timing was better, I think we could possibly get the right-of-way from them, without cost for the most part. But on these, anytime we're coming into the parking lot areas, we got to be cognizant of their parking requirements also, so that even though we've found, or the planning commission, planning folks have found that we're overparked in a lot of areas, but we still have to be sure that we're not making them a non-conforming site with the parking requirements. So it's kind of a fine balancing act of how much right-of-way you take, and if we could take more, to keep the trees in there and not totally reduce their parking down so it doesn't meet the ratios that they need. We could do that. The one thing is this: if and I'm not sure at what point I talk a little bit more about the financing, but if you were to go forward or recommend this option and want to reduce the cost down, is that you could put on a temporary basis the sidewalk behind the curb on the lower level, adjacent to the roadway, as a temporary basis, and then as they redevelop those sites, is that we could force them to move that sidewalk up and replant that lower level as a boulevard area. The other nice thing about this area, and I'm not sure, Chuck, if you can just scroll down a little bit to pull in the whole roadway, but right at that point, there's 72nd Street, if you can point that out, Chuck, where 72nd comes across.
Right here.
That's an unsignalized intersection, and the beauty of that retaining wall is that it kind of forces the pedestrians to go either to Gallagher Drive or 70th Street and then cross at the crosswalks, because when they get across right now, they have to climb that retaining wall, and we really don't want pedestrians to cross where there's no signalized intersections along France Avenue. So that's the other reason why we were looking at, hey, let's put the sidewalk up on top so that, and we would have a railing along the wall because of the height of the wall would require a railing. So there's really, unless you're really adventuresome, that you wouldn't be able to scale that from 72nd. You'd have to go up to the intersections.
And that just happens to be the point at which this whole project started, where the bridge was going to be across 72nd.
Right, that's why it was
into
placed up
between
there.
these two. Yep.
Yep.
I have a question about that sidewalk. If it's up on top of if it's in the parking lot, what's the grade? If you're in a wheelchair or somehow have difficulty with moving, is it going to be difficult?
Yeah, it's a long grade to get up there, so I guess I don't know what the exact, percentage is, but it would be ADA compliant, to get up there in a wheelchair and then back down.
Okay, and then going through, if people are willing, just some of the elements of the project. For example, the crosswalks would be what? Zebra stripe, what are they planned to be? Okay. So nothing kind of proprietary or anything, just, okay. So they're gonna be high visibility about how wide?
Right. Yeah, 8 feet is what we have right now.
8 feet. And then remove the free rights? And then are there free rights in the cross streets, and if yes, will those be removed?
Well, the free rights are from the
from
main line to the side street, so.
Yeah.
But what about the 66th going west? Is there one?
See, here's a good example of what an existing free right is, what we're talking about here, where we have that median, median island right
Right.
here. And we're basically, eliminating that little piece of, roadway right there.
And
Follow
what
me?
is this street you're looking at?
This is,
That's,
six-
okay, so,
69.
yeah.
okay, right. So then, but the southbound on France, right, onto 66th is staying? Or where are we?
Here's 66th right here. We are eliminating in all four quadrants, that
Okay.
right turn, where you can, where you don't have to go to the intersection, stop at the traffic signal. You can get in that right lane and, go right through, kind of around the corner, around the
Okay.
curve. Those are being eliminated in all four
Everywhere.
corners.
Okay. And then the signals, what are you thinking? I mean, will they, I know the bike plan calls for loop detectors, but maybe there's something else. So what are you thinking right now?
Well, we'll work with Hennepin County as far as, if it's going to be a video type system or a loop type system or a puck, in the pavement, and, we'll work with them. There will be bike detection of some type, we haven't got that far with Hennepin County yet, but there will be some detection.
But then I think what I remember from our meeting is that there would be nothing in the median for pedestrians. That was Hennepin County's preference. That'd be a one-stage cross with, if you get stranded in the middle, you just wait through. A cycle?
What we're going to push with Hennepin County is that we would have a push-button station in the center. So they could do that, or some type of a push-button in the center. Again, their preference is that they want us to design the intersection so a pedestrian can get all the way across. So the timing when that countdown timer comes on, if, walking at a normal speed, you can get all the way across. So that they want us to be able to time the intersection for that to happen the majority of the time. But there will need to be something in the center to, for that refuge of some type.
Okay.
The issue is going to, or the question is going to be is to what extent that is. If it's just a post with a push button on it, if it's going to be actually a full, signal with a countdown timer itself, or, that part of the design, we'll work with them on. But, our goal would be to have a push button in the center for that.
Okay. And then when the light goes to green, pedestrians are getting a head start. That will be planned.
That'll be part of
So-
the timing plan that we'll work with Hennepin County on, yes.
Okay.
Hennepin County has the ultimate control over the timing of the intersection, so we need to work with them on that. But, that would be, again, part of our, goal with them is that, they would have that all red phase, to let that, ped out a little bit faster, so.
I brought up the idea of reducing the speed limit, and that the minutes say that would be at an extra cost, but would a MnDOT speed study cost the city anything?
I guess I wasn't aware of that would be an extra cost.
Okay, good. The
don't-
minutes say it, but I didn't, think it would be either. Is that something that people are willing to consider? I mean, for me personally, I don't know why it needs to be 35 miles an hour.
It's a request that the county has to make to the state to do. It's something that we'll have to ask the county to ask, the state to do. So that's the process.
Yeah, what they typically do on those is they look at what they, to do a speed study is that they do an analysis of what the speeds are happening out there now and look at the 85 percentile. And so if you have a speed that's, if it's 35 miles an hour now, or even I think 40 in most of the areas, is that people are traveling, 5 to 10 over that, typically on 85 percentile. So they look at that, they look at the access points along the roadway to see if it could sustain the higher speeds or if it should be reduced down. But the key thing is looking at what are people traveling at today. We can always say we want it lower, but the state on this one is the one that actually, assigns a speed limit to it. So.
And then let's see, looking at the aerial photo today, what really was apparent is we'll build these sidewalk connections on the east side, and then people still have to get across 69th Street, for example, or get across Park Lawn on the east side, and some of these bigger intersections, is there anything, leaving France Avenue alone, but just doing the crossing, is that something that could be added and,
I should be clear, on the east side, between 66th and, or between 70th and 66th, we are actually eliminating those free rights, also. So what you see in the black lines here is we're going to be adjusting those curb lines.
Okay.
So we'll be shortening, there is no, at 69th today, there is no free right at that location. So, that one, we'll just be adjusting the radius slightly. But we're moving the one on the north side. At the entrances into Southdale, we're going to be adjusting those radiuses too, to again shorten that crossing. And then the free right that comes out of the exit, from Southdale, we're going to be eliminating that into its own lane too. So they'll have to come up to the signal to turn rather than just turning right out. So on the east side, we're going to eliminate or shorten those crossings as much as we can all the way along the corridor. Again, on the east side only.
Yeah.
Then on the intersections on the west side.
Very good, good. And then will there be some kind of marked crosswalk? I'm not sure what's there right now. Nothing?
Nothing's there right now.
Nothing right now. So
Yeah,
that
there's
would
no
be-
sidewalk or anything.
It would be included in this project, some kind of marked crossing, and what about like at 69th when, I'm not sure if there's even a signal for crossing, would the signal be replaced so people get a countdown?
It's not included at this time, in the project at 69th, so we don't have anything in the plan. At a minimum, I would say we could put a crosswalk across there, getting into the signal, maybe, a can of worms, in some cases there. At these other intersections, similar, providing crosswalks, I think would be, at a minimum we would do. And the phasing they would go with, if there's not pedestrian signals there today, they would just go with the, normal green phase of the intersection.
And then down on Park Lawn, I think, let's see, Park Lawn and Hazelton are both a little bit bigger intersections
Here's
on the east side.
Here's Hazelton right now. We're just adjusting the radiuses slightly there. There's no free rights. Again, we don't have a crosswalk in there at this point, but that's something that could probably easily be added. 72nd, again, or at no, this is Park Lawn. Or Gallagher, excuse me. That's the intersection that the Three Rivers is going to be working at. But again, we could add that. Here's Park Lawn here. Again, we're just adjusting the radiuses. There is no crosswalk across there today either. So,
I should probably clarify that. There's no marked crosswalk.
yeah.
By state statute, it is an unmarked crosswalk, so people do cross there, I'm assuming that there is actually push buttons on the existing signals today for
I would
for
presume
people to
so,
cross
too.
there also.
I would
But
presume
the
so.
county typically does not mark their crosswalks.
If there's not, it's signed for no pedestrians across there, and then we would need to obviously, take care of that if that's the case, so.
And then back to 69th Street, on that median, is that we would provide a safe haven in that median also? Because we can't push them out in the traffic, so coming across there, we'd have to put in a ped ramp, similar to what they just did on France, just north of the crosstown, to get the peds across the roadway.
Yeah, we would have to break the median there.
But just for the sake of discussion, what if we took option 3, as we've just discussed it, but, and I hate to say this, get rid of the boulevard and do a sidewalk along the curb, the entire length? What would that get us to cost-wise?
$2.3 million.
So your $2.3 million option is everything we've just talked about, except for,
Okay, no, I better, I'm sorry, I'll clarify that a little bit. It doesn't include, it only includes changing the width in both directions at the intersections. We match back into the existing, past the intersections, both northbound and southbound. So we're just putting a sidewalk behind the existing curb, all the way through then.
Side streets and on France.
Side street and on Friends, yes.
So if everything that we talked about in option 3, except for needing the additional right-of-way for the well, I guess I should back up and just say, what kind of sidewalk can we have without additional right-of-way?
You can have like 6 to 7 feet for the most part along
Against the
that
curb?
entire, yeah, against the curb. No boulevard or very minimal.
And I think you have to realize that, and of course I'm sure you understand that, putting that type of walk next to this type of facility, it's, even if you had 6 or 7 feet, 6 or 7 feet isn't totally usable. There's going to be a tremendous amount of shy distance. It's not developing the idea that we've talked about either in this committee or with the public of generating a truly livable street that you want to have in this community.
And I agree with that, and I would love the 8 or 10-foot boulevard. And I think most of us probably would. But looking at the numbers, and my understanding is that, close to 6 million is way over what I think would be approved. So needing to strike a balance and bring it down closer to the budget and still provide for mobility, right now we have people who have to get off the bus into a snowdrift. We don't want that anymore. So even a sidewalk that is not the sidewalk we all would want, but a sidewalk would be better than a snowdrift. Is there, what would we have, or could that say there's 7 feet of 6, 7 feet right now? If you just take 2 feet more, what does that do to the cost?
I think one of the costs that I would recommend that you look at first are the monument costs. You had indicated the $450,000 that's probably in the budget for that currently. I know that we've also stretched some of the ideas here in terms of not just looking at the 3 intersections that we were asked to do, but in creating that walkway along the east side where there's currently no sidewalk. And then being obligated to change the curb radiuses and other things along other roads. Those are adding costs. I guess one of the things that I would suggest that you may want to look at is that these 3 intersections are setting up, again, a vocabulary, a statement about how you want the rest of the corridor to work. If you can't reach for the whole corridor at this point, I still think whatever you do needs to, in order to facilitate future work, at least be the right statement in these 3 places at a minimum. It would be my suggestion.
So are you saying, well, I mean, we have to do the sidewalks. That's part of the grant. So those have to be done. And then, to me, I just think if we're taking people along France Avenue on the east side, I was so glad to see that it had been contemplated that 69th would be addressed and Park Lawn and stuff. So that, I think, has to be done. But so you're saying keep the boulevard width and stuff at the intersections, but
well, what I would suggest would be, again, to create an opportunity in the future. You can always add in the monuments. Frankly, you can add in the trees. It's very hard, once a sidewalk has been built, to have the public see you take it out to put in a boulevard and a new sidewalk. I would recommend at this point that if you are concerned about budget, that, and of course we all are, but the idea here is to set up something that will allow this facility to not only be functionally correct, but that it will be a revenue generator, that this will be a place that people will want to be in the future. And I would suggest that set up the space, at a minimum, set up the space. Set up the boulevards, set up the sidewalks. If you have to eliminate anything at this point, eliminate the monuments, eliminate the trees along the whole, that whole side and budget them later, because then you can put them in. If you don't have the space, you can never put them in.
This is the option one, that we came up with this time. And Andy, what was the width of these boulevards in this option? We narrowed them up to like 6 feet or something.
This is a revised option
Yeah.
three?
Yeah. No, this is the scope one.
Oh, the scope, yeah, that one, I think we're down, what is it on, I guess we don't have a typical, 6 feet, I think is what we're down to at that point, yes.
So at the intersections, in that scope change, revision, that's one reason why you can see we had some right-of-way costs that we didn't anticipate, because we did carry the boulevard out at the intersections. We did provide the boulevard, at the intersections, and that's where we had some right-of-way impacts because of that. Although we narrowed it up, to the 6 feet, we did carry a boulevard through. That could easily be widened out, and then make the connections, back to the existing sidewalks and so forth, and move it later. I mean, getting it set up, for the future. I mean, if that's something that you want to look at.
Commissioner?
Might work to cover the shortfall between the essentially 2+ and the 5 million plus that it's now become, because I would hate to lose those boulevards. I don't know.
That's a great tee up, because I was going to interject there with
Thank you.
with the funding. Yeah, we've had a lot of internal discussion of this overage and the gap in the funding. And before I forget too, is that the city council on Tuesday night at their workshop talked a little bit about, went through the work plan that they've been working on. It's got a second quarter update, I guess, on that. And they talked a little bit about this project, and that they indicated they would like to have a workshop before the August 6th city council meeting. And we're trying to work that out the night before, starting at 5 o'clock the night before August 6th. It's on a Monday, because the night to unite is on Tuesday. So if you could put that on your calendar, because I think we're going to make that work. They're shuffling around one of the agenda items to get this on there. But there's a couple ways to look at it. One is if you like the revised option 3, one way to look at it is to do a special assessed project along the corridor. And what that would do is it would allow us to special assess the properties that are butting the corridor, and then purchase the right-of-way. Essentially becomes a wash, because we're special assessing them for the right-of-way, the extra right-of-way costs that we're purchasing. And being a federal project, is you have to purchase the right-of-way at the market value, essentially, is what it kind of comes down to. So one way of covering those overages is we would move this into a special assessed project. And what we would do is, if the council wanted to go forward with that, is that we would set a public hearing date for the project hearing for the first meeting in September, so we can get all the advertisements out. And so then it goes the 429 process, similar to what we do with our other roadway projects, and how we funded a good portion of the original 70th Street roundabouts between France and York. The other one that on this is, if you don't like to go that route, is then, if you want to recommend the scope change one with some modifications, is recommend that, or maybe the ETC could recommend, if you can work out the financing with the special assess type project, we'd really like to see the option 3 revised, or we would like to at least minimally perform what the scope change application was. So I don't know if that answers the question totally, but it's not a done deal on the financing, but it would put us down that road of trying to acquire the financing to do a project that would, as I see, would really set up the corridor for future expansions and in the future, and get that urban design piece in there, so that you have the nice boulevards, the median trees, and then you have the multi-use pathway. We're calling it sidewalk because of the federal standards to get that through, but it's essentially a multi-use pathway. And as buildings start redeveloping along the corridor, you'd have that multi-use pathway, and then eventually you could get a pedestrian zone adjacent to the buildings. So then that could eventually become a bikeway if you would like to have that in the future. So it kind of really tees you up for a lot of different things that you could do, many years out along the corridor.
I kind of like the idea of having, looking at option 3, it makes the intersection somewhat right-sized for future expansion. And I guess I'm looking at moving that forward, option 3, with the thought of some potential cost savings that would come up in the workshop. I don't know that we can cut and paste here. I think maybe in the workshop session is a place to allow the council to express their interests too. So I think the $5.8 million is quite a bit more than the $2 million we started with. But I think that at least brings the corridor to the right size. Like I mentioned at the special meeting, I'd hate to do a sidewalk somewhere that it would be used for a few years and then dismantled and rebuilt. It seems like an awful waste of funds. So I guess I'm just stating my opinion that I'd like to move forward with option 3. Perhaps we can hear a little more comment and then see what other people think.
I'd like to, I think I agree with that. If we're going to do a workshop, one of the things I'd like us to come prepared with would be the cost estimates associated with, if we remove the monuments. I think maybe I'd like to know what the cost would be of not doing the extra radius adjustments on those other intersections. I mean, we're either doing the intersections or we're not, and I'd be okay with, at this point, saying we're getting by with those as is, and let's know what that difference is so the council at least can use that. And I guess you were suggesting maybe the trees. I'm not so sure I would agree with that. I'd look at the costs associated with the radius adjustments on the other intersections well before I'd ever look at the trees.
We'll come to that meeting with the entire breakdown. So we'll be able to tell you, intersection by intersection by, all the details. We'll have all that information with us.
Commissioner.
So can I request that the breakdown be sent to us in advance, obviously?
Yep.
Thank you.
There is a cost table in the appendix of the feasibility report that has all the costs in it. Now, it doesn't break it down into, it has intersection by intersection, but it doesn't break it down into, the radiuses and things like that. But it does have a cost breakdown in the appendix.
I'm kind of at a, I mean, I want the boulevards and I want the project to be, as beautiful as it can be. I mean, I do think that if we put an east side sidewalk, we need to think about those other intersections like 69th and everything. And I think that's as important as the sidewalks. We can't strand people when they hit the street. If monuments are $450,000, well, that seems like an easy thing to cut at this moment. But I'm really under the impression, based on a couple of conversations I had, that this project, even with the option of special assessments, is thought of as being too costly. It's 3 times over, at this point, it's 3 times over what the original budget was. And so I would like to be clearer about some middle option and what can be done for something less than twice the original budget. I don't want to be any more specific than that, but I think we need to be able to show that this can be done for less than twice the original budget. And I have to believe it's possible. I mean, the the funding application contemplated urban design, talked about beautification and all of that. The funding application talked about right-of-way acquisition. So, I mean, I think these things, if they weren't contemplated, they should have been contemplated, because the council approved services based on a just over $2 million project. So going into, I guess now I have a question, and that is, if we have a meeting with the council on August 6th, are they going to be asked to approve the feasibility study that night, or will that come later?
Right now, we're advertising and sending out notices for August 6th to be a public hearing before the city council at their regular scheduled city council meeting for that night. You know, if you go back to the schedule, I mean, that's you know, if they're going to go forward with something that needs right of way, we need to get the ball rolling on the appraisals and everything else for the right of way, because that takes quite a bit of time to roll through all that. If they decide to know where we'll go back to the original scope change, so you know, the lesser one, the $2.3 million one, is that then we would have a little bit more time in the schedule to talk about things. But if any right of way that we have to get that rolling right away in August.
Right. Well, they do have a second meeting in August, and the schedule right now says it has to be started by September 1st. So that would give a second meeting in August.
It does.
For the approval.
Yeah, you could do that, but you know, the sooner the better if you're going to go after right away to acquire all the, you know, all the documentation, the appraisals, and everything else that you have to go through.
But this project is asking the council to commit $5 million more than $5 million when they were thinking of committing $1 million.
Yep.
So I think a little more time would be
And they
useful.
also have the ability to continue the public hearing if we don't come to a resolution prior at the workshop and such, is that they would have the ability to continue the public hearing to make the decision on the second meeting in August if they so wished.
Commissioner?
So I'm glad I let you go ahead, Commissioner Genevieve, because that was kind of exactly what I wanted to ask, and you asked it in a much better way. When we go to that workshop, when we have that workshop, what I'd like to focus on is where can we cut the right-of-way parts. Obviously, the construction part's not changed that much, and that's not going to change that much anyway. And then we found 450,000 out of the 1.3 million to cut, but what are the other things we can cut? So I'm expecting some details over there. But I mean, in a sense, what I'd like to have when I come to that meeting or before is what can we get for 3 million, 4 million, and then we know what we can get for 7 million. So, in a sense, just keep that as the constraint and say, okay, this is what you can get for 3, this is what you can get for 4. And really, I think the opportunity is in the right of way. That's where the possibility is to cut the cost here. I know that we talked about northbound lanes being narrower than southbound lanes. Is that, or am I getting it opposite? Why can't both of them be narrower? Does that help with, or does that add cost?
That would raise the construction
That'll raise
cost
the construction cost? Okay.
significantly.
Going to paint the lines and leave that gutter over there, whatever it would be. That was kind of my question, even though I didn't ask it that way. But yeah, if you move the curb line, obviously it's going to raise construction costs through the whole corridor. Was that where you were at? Okay.
We can probably resolve this at the workshop. I'm
Right.
just curious on the west side, is there any right-of-way acquisition?
Just at the intersections a little bit.
Okay, but not along the.
No, we're not doing anything along the corridor there.
I guess, yeah, just to follow up on if we could have it coded by project, so we don't have to try to guess if we do X, if they're all at least grouped, if you could, that'd be perfect.
Commissioner Bass?
I like the Commissioner Janovy's suggestion to look at an option that is around twice the original, or less than twice the original budget. I think that would be a value. And while I agree that what we're looking at for the revised option 3 is a lot of money, and what I'm about to say is more sort of philosophical, so bear with me for a second. We never got to the point of having a feasibility study to review for the originally proposed pedestrian overpass. And so we don't have hard numbers to consider. It's all sort of in the never happened realm. But I strongly suspect that the path we were heading down would have landed us in about the same place. And without much ability to sort of tweak and take things off and this, that, and the other. So I guess what I'm putting out there is the notion of sort of cost per user. And we had a lot of discussion about a pedestrian overpass and the value and utility that that would have for residents. And I think the value and utility of the project as it is now conceived will be of much greater use to residents, and that the cost per user will be greatly, a lot lower than what it would have been as the project was originally conceived. So I just wanted to put that out there. I don't disagree with any of the points that have been made, but I also want us to keep some perspective here about what we're reviewing now and the value it has to residents. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Braden.
Yes, I like the points that Commissioner Bass just brought up and thinking of the value that it has. But one of the things I haven't heard discussed a lot is the value that this project is going to have to the commercial properties at Southdale and Macy's and Byerly's, and to the extent possible that they can contribute it because they are going to be benefiting by it. I would like to see us really pursue either, where possible, dedication of right-of-way, or if it involves a special assessment. So I don't think we ought to just, we can't, approach them and request some sort of a contribution to it, because I think there's value to them, and I'd like to see that pursued strongly. So.
Thank you. I think I also appreciate this latest discussion. I think I brought up in the special meeting that we had that the bridge that was proposed for this area, even though we had the $2 million, I think the budget was going to be around this $6 to $8 million range anyway. I figured this revised scope was going to end up somewhere pretty close to where it did. And I think you're right. If Commissioner Genevieve, you're looking for something less than twice of the $2 million. If we were able to move a majority of the right-of-way costs off to the landowners along that corridor that are going to be benefiting from this. I don't know that you're going to lose the whole 2.1 million, but if you take that from the 5.8, we're down to 3.7 million, which is less than half of the 4 million that you showed. So I think there's some ways to get this done, and I think the workshop is the place for it. So I don't know if there, I think we should make a motion to accept the concepts of option 3 with the thought that we would talk about financing and other changes along the way so we can get it down to a reasonable cost that we can all feel comfortable with. I'm not sure how, does somebody want to make that type of motion or feel comfortable doing that?
Well, I like that motion, and I largely agree with it. I won't be able to vote for it. I think the feasibility study still contains too many things that will be confusing. Page 29, for example, where the bullet points are is where there are things said about the project that really are not quite as accurate as they need to be. And so I would look forward to that meeting with the council and to getting done what Paul just said, but I'm not going to be able to support.
Yeah, the one more thing I
moving
had.
forward the feasibility study,
Okay.
if that's the
The one
motion.
other thing I was going to mention is that, the option of pushing it back into later in August. This project's already been up against too many deadlines. We've got the money back from the funding sources, which was a lot of work. I want to see that this goes forward. So I don't really want to delay it any further than we already have by missing the special meeting deadline. So I guess I'm looking forward to a motion that we approve option 3 based on our discussion here tonight, that we will look at ways to reduce the right-of-way costs as much as possible, ideally having those landowners share in the contribution of that amount, and that we get the cost down again as far as we can by perhaps reducing some of the construction through the free rights where we're taking them out, perhaps leaving them on the intersections that we're not dealing with, and move forward and talk to the council about how their feelings and wishes to go forward as well.
I think I'm comfortable with that. I think, so can I just make that motion? And I think just the one point is that we need to have very good information at that meeting, and I think it can be done.
So can I get permission to amend the motion a little bit? Can we just not mention option 3? Because I think the concepts in this option, the boulevard, which we all like, and the sidewalks and the connectivity along the streets, those are the concepts that we want. And I think this option 3 captures some of those concepts. I think all we're trying to get is that these important concepts with the constraint of less than 4 million as the budget. That would be option 4, really.
I don't know, in here, in this option 3, what's discussed is a right-of-way acquisition of $2,169,500. I don't know how that, it's still going to be somewhere in that neighborhood of cost, whether or not it's donated by the properties or it's assessed to the properties and then donated, given back via the property, and it may still go to the property, to the total project cost, even though it doesn't end up being a cost to the project. So I don't know that we want to necessarily talk about hard numbers in the motion. So
Yep. Thank you, Chair. I think when we started looking at this, we were concentrating on the crossings because that's what the PED bridge was for. So I think obviously there's been scope creep. We want a lot more than we originally started with. So what about if we come to the consensus of approving the scope change revised, and then in addition to that, say, have the consultants bring what can 3 million and then 4 million get us in meeting the living streets and urban design principles. So at least we're following through with what we wanted originally with the flexibility, assuming of course that would get approved by the council, and then having a couple options that the council consider that would get us some of those additional living streets concepts. So just a thought.
I think I could support that. So you're saying scope change revised, which we didn't hear a lot of detail on tonight, but my belief is it's basically everything we talked about, except, I hate to say this, minus most of the boulevard and the monumentation, and some other landscaping items. And then add on to that what we can add on to it up to a point that the council is comfortable. So we still get the crossings, we get sidewalks, we get, that I think I could support.
At this point, I have no knowledge of what the council's comfortable with. I mean, it seems to me they originally, they saw the original project, and I believe they were the ones that said, let's create this, more of this urban design. And so, I mean, I don't like to see projects that started off at $2 million turn into $7 million. I mean, that seems like a huge problem to me. And on the other hand, maybe the council is interested in all this. I don't know. So, I mean, all we're really saying at this point, I think, is let's push this stuff forward to the council. We're saying, here are the concepts, as you're saying, here are the concepts we like. We want to be able to have that discussion with all the information we need to start picking and choosing if, assuming whatever that cost threshold is for them, so we can get to that threshold. But why would we start now with an assumption that they have to keep it to 3 or they have to keep it to 4? I mean, I don't know what they want.
I need a second.
You want to restate
Well,
the motion, or do you want to?
I think we're somewhat all getting to the same point, but I would still like to move that we move forward with option 3, provided that all of the options and add-ons in addition to the revised scope change be reviewed at the workshop.
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor and a second. Is there more discussion on this?
Can we just be sure that the motion includes your comment about considering financing options?
That is what I intended, yep.
I did so good.
I will move forward with option 3, provided that all of the additions to the revised scope change be clearly delineated, so that we can have a discussion as to what should be added or not added at the council workshop. And, well, that would, yeah, including the financing for those options.
Okay, there was a motion and a second. Is there more discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. I believe motion carries. Thank you all for that good discussion. I think we'll move on to our living, hold on, where am I at? Student member, the student member is not in attendance tonight. And then we'll move along to, under updates, number 6C, number 2, the Bike Edina Task Force, June 14th minutes. Jennifer?
I have an update for BETF, our discussion on sidewalks that I emailed people, but if possible, would people be okay with moving living streets ahead of that so that our guests don't have to wait longer?
Sure, I should have done that myself. I'm sorry. Let's move right on to Living Streets. We'll circle back to the Bike Edina Task Force after that.
All right, thank you, Chair. Maybe I'll introduce this. Next time, we'll make sure to get you guys in front of the France Avenue projects. So. Yeah, tonight, HR Green and Bar Engineering will be providing an update to the full ETC on where we're at with the Living Streets Committee. And I think they've done an excellent job. They've provided a document that Wayne emailed out recently about the Living Streets vision based on the workshop, the input from the committee, and really doing some outreach. And then also they've come up with a policy template. And they're going to present some of those items tonight and also some of the next steps. So I'll just give a brief introduction. And this is Fred Rozelmowski from BAR, and also attending is Jack Brose and Dan Edgerton from HR Green. So Fred, if you want to kick it off.
Great, thank you. Good evening, commissioners. We had a very brief presentation planned, but seeing how thorough you are, we're gonna take our time. No, actually, we'll do what we need to do. So I'm gonna just jump right into it with that good introduction. What we're going to cover tonight is a little bit, for the benefit of the viewing audience, what is a living street? The France Avenue project certainly was an introduction to that too. We had interviewed some neighboring communities and Los Angeles and lessons learned in their living street policy. We'll report a little bit about that. We've reviewed some of your existing plans and policies. Dan Edgerton is going to talk about that, along with the visions and goal statements that has been created and the draft policy that's been written. And then we'll go on to the next steps. So first of all, what is a living street? If we look at infrastructure in street environments, you can classify things as gray and green infrastructure, with gray being what is traditionally seen as roads, with traffic speeds, the utilities that are under it, all the car-oriented stuff. And on the other side is the green infrastructure, which is often not paid a lot of attention to. Stormwater capture and reuse as opposed to just draining it away quickly. Street trees, pedestrian movement, pedestrian safety, bikes, community and aesthetic character. Now, these things are often not addressed in a street project. And what a living street does is bring this more into balance, that yes, traffic and the utilities under that is very important. That's what a road is all about, but also sort of these other things about pedestrian movement and street trees and stormwater capture. That is important too, and we want to have all of that in our street corridors. So some of the components that are in a living street would be impervious surface reduction, which save costs on road construction, reduces the amount of stormwater runoff that needs to be treated. Also included in a living street would be stormwater treatment facilities such as rainwater gardens, curb extensions, which are shown in the picture here, urban forestry, and certainly street trees that add a lot of benefits of livability of a community, sidewalks, different sort of walkways, bike trails and bike lanes, utility corridors, soil treatment, community art, and public education. So, on each street this would be different, and the idea is that every street is designed individually as the time comes to implement a living street, as is testified by the France Avenue project. So some of the principles in living streets is to provide access for all modes of transportation and all users, ages, and ability, to serve the land uses around them, besides getting traffic through, encouraging walking, bicycling, and transit use, and for a number of reasons, people's health being one, saving energy being another. Want to improve stormwater treatment, promote economic activity, as again witnessed in the France Avenue project, how that could happen. Encourage human interaction as people get out of their cars and walk and bike. There's more community interaction, and again, improve the urban forest. So now on to the project that we've been working on with you folks in developing this framework for living streets in Edina. And we've built this off of work you've been doing. So basically what we've done is kind of a chunk in the middle of your process, your complete process. And in March, you had a workshop run by Ryan Snyder. He is the gentleman who developed the Living Streets plan for Los Angeles and did an exceptional job. A number of you folks were at that workshop along with city council members and members of the community. A very productive meeting and workshop that came up with some vision statements. And we've taken those and refined them and got that down to a very usable statement, which Dan is going to be talking about. So with that, then we've created a policy, a draft policy, which has been provided to you prior to this meeting for your review and refinement. And so the next steps would be to take that a little bit further, refine that as necessary, develop an implementation plan, and think about the process for actually building living streets. A couple comments, and I think I'll keep this brief. Some things we learned from Brian Snyder in Los Angeles. We had a call with him to flesh out what he thought was really the most important parts of what he's learned in that long process in Los Angeles. And some of those things are to use the 10 policy points from the National Complete Streets Coalition as a starting point, and that is what we have done. that the City of Edina's standards and procedures would need to be updated as this flex, and I know you folks are already in process of doing that for a number of different reasons, and that implementation plans are key. Besides the living street policy, to have a sidewalk policy, a stormwater master plan, urban forestry plan. So those are important components that Ryan sees for a successful living streets plan. And there's more that's written up in the report, so I won't go through all those right now, but you have that in your packet. We also, at Bar Engineering, we had written the living streets plan for North St. Paul, and a few lessons there. We learned that public input is critical, and you really need to educate the public prior to setting forth this policy. To understand the demographics, especially when you do your first few projects, that you want to really have these people understand them and be supportive before you build them. Once they're built, people really like them, but it's always the change that people make people a little nervous. Recognize that every street is unique, and the design for each street would be different, and even as we're seeing in France Avenue, even each block can be somewhat different. And then to work with other agencies as you're doing this, and in particular watershed districts, that can be very helpful in the process. Okay, let me hand it over to Dan.
Thanks, Fred. Again, my name is Dan Edgerton. I'm with HR Green. I'll just jump right in. So one of the key tasks in our project was a review of the City of Edina's existing plans and policies. At this time, I'm going to keep it at a pretty high level. This is all in the memo, so if you want to dig into the details, it's there. So for example, you've got, you're not starting from an empty slate. Edina's got a number of plans and policies, your comp plan, your bike plan, water resources plan, you've got a capital improvements plan, and all of this sort of moves us in the direction that we're trying to head here with living streets and gets us on our way. In addition, you've got a number of policies and regulations, and we understand that you're in the process of updating your city code. This is great timing to really take some of this into consideration with that process and get your living streets principles implemented. There's also a lot of momentum going on for this type of work with your Do Town initiatives, your Green Steps initiatives. We've heard about a Safe Route to School plan, and all this is sort of moving us in the direction of sustainability for transportation. So kind of drilling down in the nuts and bolts of what we did. We started off with taking a look at the vision and goal statements that were done as part of that workshop back in March of 2012. And basically, as part of that, the participants, and I know some of you were there, were asked to come up with a vision for Edina, come up with a vision for your living streets. So we've kind of taken a look at that and distilled it into a vision statement. But first, we kind of wanted to get into the real visual stuff, and it's supposed to be something that we can aspire to as a city, and the kind of the warm and fuzzy planning stuff. So backing up or taking a step back from the design details of a France Avenue project. But so generally, participants envisioned Edina as a place with a cohesive community identity, where all modes of transportation are equally accessible, where biking and walking are not only safe and convenient, but also fun. And that's your promenade. That's a fun place to go. I live near there. Where families regularly choose walking or biking instead of driving. Where people choose exercise for fun. I think this one is a great one. It's kind of I think this really epitomizes the living streets process, where the streets are a place where you would want to sit. And that's a photo from the country club neighborhood in Edina. Where environmental stewardship and reduced energy consumption, so sustainability, are pursued by the public and private sectors alike. So it's kind of, in France Avenue, you talked about, can we bring in Byerly's or Macy's and get them to sign off on this, not only because it's good for the public, but acknowledge it's good for them as well. So working with the Living Streets Committee, Jennifer and Paul and Michael, we kind of rehashed the Living Streets vision statement. And this is important because it's going to guide your future efforts, and it sets the stage for why we're going to do this. Living Streets balance the needs of motorists, pedestrians, bicycles, transit riders, so those are your modes, in ways that promote safety, convenience, enhance community identity, create economic vitality, improve environmental sustainability, and provide meaningful opportunities for active living and better health. So that's a mouthful, but it gets in all of those pieces. And we're not here presenting a final plan. This is a draft, so we're looking for input. If somebody wants to wordsmith, or if there's a component that we need to add or strike, we want to hear that. So I'm not going to read all these off, but these are the goals or direction that were established out of that workshop. Again, these are important because where the vision talks about why we're going to do living streets, what the goals do is tell us what exactly are we looking to do. So again, it's very high-level planning stuff. So next we move into the policy. This is really kind of the meat of what we're presenting here. And so as Fred mentioned, we started off with kind of the guidance from the LA County policy. So we looked at the 10 national policy elements for the Complete Streets Coalition. So as I'm sure most of you are aware, Complete Streets is a term, there's complete streets, there's green streets, and now living streets. And they're all sort of synonymous. There are different angles to each of them, but they all kind of push us in the same general direction. So we started with that kind of policy template, and we tried to customize it based on what was said in the workshop to really meet the values of Edina. So here it is. This is in a nutshell the draft policy framework that we came up with. We've already went through the vision statement and the goals, and then there are a number of kind of specific policy elements that I'll fly through at a pretty high level here, but they're all in the plan. And this is the important stuff that I think is going to be up to you guys to kind of take some ownership of. We took a shot at it. We had some good review from our Living Streets Committee, but again, as we move forward, this is something we want to refine, and this is what gives our Living Streets process its teeth to get implemented. So starting out with number one, living streets are for all users in all modes. And a key point here is we want to prioritize our street improvements for those who need it most. So we have roads that cars can drive on, but we don't necessarily have a complete bicycle network as identified in the bike plan. And we have some sidewalk gaps, and we need to do better to serve children and elderly. So maybe there's some safe routes to school work in there. So there's a priority there. Connectivity, we want to overcome barriers in a focused way to get us to the places we want to go, to Centennial Park, to the schools, to the places that people go. Jurisdiction, I think this is a really key point. The Living Streets policy should cover all of the streets within the city's jurisdiction. Now, having said that, Minnesota's got a complete streets legislation, and they're working towards a complete streets policy. So when I say Minnesota, I'm talking about the Department of Transportation. Hennepin County also has a complete streets policy. So with this Edina Living Streets policy, you're kind of covered system-wide from top to bottom, all the streets within the city. So phases, I think this is what gives your policy its teeth. I think we want to be firm, and the recommendation is that this applies to all projects. Maintenance, new construction, rehab, all of it. Now, having said that, there needs to be a clear process for exceptions. If you're patching a pothole, maybe that's not going to trigger the process. And so that process for exceptions is something that needs to be developed. As far as design, we're recommending that we, in the next phase of the project, develop a Living Streets plan with more specific design guidance. So here we're going to kind of talk about the outline of how things could be implemented, but it's not going to get into the specifics. We'll present some kind of examples as far as design, but that's something that we need to get into. It needs to be context sensitive. And so what that is it's really about the land use. You need to make sure that you're designing improvements to fit the character of the place where they're going. It's not just transportation for the sake of having a road. It's the end that you need to keep in mind. And a key part of that is stakeholder engagement and making sure residents and people who are going to be using the different improvements are on board and it fits their needs. And it's really customized and flexible. Implementation, again, we're getting back to the development of kind of a complete Living Streets plan that we can use to develop a program or capital improvement plan, kind of inform the processes that you already have. And then operations. This is something that came out of our Living Streets Committee review. And we kind of thought that, instead of just focusing on design and construction, it really needs to have an operations component. So that means adjusting your maintenance standards and practices so that the bike lanes are cleared or striped as needed. Enforcement, so for example, making sure we're enforcing speed in pedestrian zones, and there should also be an ongoing public education. So you can't just change the speed limit and not tell anybody why. We got to make sure people are on board and aware of what's happening. So at a really high level, that's the policy, and it's all in the report in more detail. And again, take a look, and we encourage any feedback. So that's the meat of what we've done for this phase. The remaining tasks in this phase is we're going to identify some potential funding sources and summarize them in the document. We're going to develop a kind of a work plan for the next steps or for the next phase, and then we're going to finalize the policy and get it back to you. Next phases of the project, moving forward, you should really have a more comprehensive public engagement process. We need to take this on the road and calibrate it to your residents and make sure it's what everybody wants. And then you've got to adopt your policy, and that's going to give you, the committee, that kind of the empowerment to go and do this. And then we've got to develop a more concrete Living Streets plan. So with that, I'll give back to Fred to talk about the next steps.
Well, you just summarized the next steps, so let me just go through them quickly. You folks have already started your public engagement process, which is a lengthy process, and smartly so, that you really need to educate your constituents here. And there's a number of ways to do that through public meetings and websites and et cetera, which you're well aware of. In the next phase too, we would be looking at inventory of this, creating the plan, and inventorying the streets, seeing what needs to be done, setting priorities of what streets get Living Streets treatment first. And then coming up with an implementation process, which I know Jack Bros has done a lot of work with in looking at things like functional class and understanding the relative importance of different modes of transportation, that each street is different, that walking or biking might be more important in some streets than others, and traffic might take priority in others. So looking at that kind of carefully in analysis to come up with the implementation plan. And then lastly, to create templates of what these Living Streets types could be, and there could be a lot of them depending on the residential type of street, residential to commercial, high traffic. We've done a couple as examples in this report that you can take a look at your leisure, some for collector streets and some for residential streets. The collector streets are primarily the cross-section from your bike plan, with the side treatments being different, that outside of the curb. And that's what's really taking a closer look at. And what I really see as the difference between a living street and a complete streets is that what's happening outside that curb. That the environmental aspect of stormwater treatment, capturing stormwater to water trees, and so we do have a healthy canopy and creating that canopy. So I think that's what I see as the difference between complete streets and living streets. So that's where we're at. We've got your report in front of you. We're interested in your comments now, and our next step is then to incorporate that and finish this report up and let you move on to the next step.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
All right, thanks, Fred. Yeah, and tonight I think, thanks for the presentation, great presentation. What I guess I want is just any feedback, either now or send me an email. What I want to do is gather, if you have any comments on the Living Streets vision and the draft policy, let me know if something needs to get tweaked a little bit. That's kind of the process we're in, and I'll work with Wayne and the consulting team to make that happen. And then, so this is a huge first step in getting to where we want to be. So I would see this as a great spot to be in, and now it's just taking that next step into the plan development and public outreach and really understanding what citizen stakeholders want. And that's where the plan can include safe routes to school components, and it's very flexible on how we put that implementation plan together. So again, this is a very good backbone to where we're going, and I'm just looking for comments. So with that, I can turn it back over to Wayne or the chair.
Yeah, any comments? Courtney?
I actually have several comments, but I will put them in an email to you. My only one is to Wayne, actually. Did I know that Mary Jackson, the staff person at MnDOT, who is designated for Complete Streets, reached out to you about a week and a half ago about this? I was just wondering if you were able to connect with her about her questions.
I haven't connected yet with her. No,
Okay.
no.
Where I'm going with that is on page 3. It says, as the Edina Living Streets policy moves forward, the city should collaborate with its partners, Hemba County, MnDOT, et cetera. So, thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, Jennifer, go ahead.
Do you want to give people a timeline for feedback?
Chair and commission members, yeah, I would like to have comments probably within a couple weeks, because then that could give me some time to bring something back to the next official meeting of the ETC. So I would say 2 weeks.
I have a comment or question. I thought I remembered back from the workshop in February that one of the components are parts of a policy, and I could be misremembering this, is sort of system-wide evaluation. Is that just that folded into the implementation plan versus being part of the policy? Or
Yeah, Chair and Commission, yeah, that's more of the implementation plan, and looking at the system-wide, that's where you look at the inventory and then you're prioritizing. So you're looking at the whole system. So is that kind of what you're getting at?
yeah, I guess more around data collection and how we're measuring progress, we're making progress versus sort of inventorying what we've got and prioritization.
So performance measures.
Yes.
How do we measure if Living Streets is doing what it's supposed to do as we move forward?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say that would be a conversation when we reach out to stakeholders, and those are the comments I want from you is, well, how would you measure the success of Living Streets? So that's the kind of feedback that I would like to have within the next couple weeks.
Okay, thank you.
One thought in looking at this is, and great job, is how much work we have ahead of us. I mean, there's a lot of work ahead of us. And there are also things happening that somehow we need to take advantage of. The timing, the Safe Routes to School project that is beginning, and redoing the city's code, and some of these other things, and development projects that we've heard about, like fire lease. And how do we, as we're going down this road, how do we make sure that we are coordinating? It's more than outreach, it's also coordination. And that is, I think, maybe something that the working group should really sit down and talk about, or somehow reach out to staff members for that.
I have a response and a question and a follow-up question to that. To date, the working group has been comprised of consultants and members of the ETC, correct? But it hasn't had any broader representation. And Robin, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
not to leave you out.
Chair and Commission, it's been more of the technical side. We haven't reached out to a big group. What we wanted to do is, we had great information from the workshop, et cetera. When you get a very large group, sometimes it takes a longer time to get consensus. So I think we all had the expertise and the background to bring what we wanted, but now it's that next step where we do reach out a little more.
Yeah, so I guess my comment is that one strategy that could be considered to improve collaboration, coordination among all these different things that are happening is to now sort of reach out and invite members of other boards and commissions that or other staff from the city that are working on facets of the implementation of this and may have something to contribute to this.
Okay, any further comments on this? Well, thank you very much for your presentation this evening. I think we've gone a long way since March, so it's great. We'll be looking forward to moving forward with this and getting on to those next steps soon. So thanks, Michael. We will move back to the Bike Edina Task Force Jennifer?
Thank you. I emailed out today a memo. It's a revised Edina Bike Ordinance memo. And I realized, I think I can't remember when it was sent out, but most people probably didn't have the chance to look at it. But on our Bike Edina Task Force meeting last week, the task force talked about it actually at the June meeting and then again at the July meeting, and approved a recommendation that we change the ordinance. They had this memo and we discussed all the issues. And so their recommendation is that the biking on sidewalk ordinance be changed. And I said I would bring it to this group. And so maybe we can schedule a discussion for next time. Would people be comfortable with that? Okay. Is there any information that I should bring forward other than in the memo, or people okay with that? Okay. Well, you have a month. Yeah.
I'm just trying to remember, because I think I glanced at it. Was the change, the proposed change, the one that said we can use the sidewalks as bike paths, but only for bicyclists with wheels 24 inches? Am I seeing that?
No,
That was not in there? Or?
So no, it's not in this. Some cities do have something like that. This would not restrict size of wheels or anything. But what it does do is it requires, I mean, you have to yield to pedestrians by law, right? And give an audible signal. But also it requires people on a sidewalk to ride at a walking pace when pedestrians are present, and also a walking pace when approaching an intersection and when entering the street. And then probably the thing that might be a little bit more controversial is that it allows biking in sidewalks. It would specifically permit biking on sidewalks in business districts, which is a separate state law. So it would specifically permit that, except where buildings abut the street. So 50th and France, for example, the buildings abut the sidewalk. I'm sorry, I misspoke. And it would not permit riding on a sidewalk there. And it also would not permit riding on a sidewalk where posted. And I didn't have a conversation with him, but I left a message at, the ETF member requested that I follow up with the bike coordinator in Minneapolis to see what they do. And he left me a message back, and he said, in Minneapolis, it pretty much mimics state law, and they really don't post no biking on sidewalk as a rule. I mean, here and there, they have it, but their only restriction is you can't bike in a business district. And then the other thing I asked is how they message around it, because we don't want to send the message, hey, everybody bike on the sidewalk. And he said that they really don't. It's not promoted as a bike path or a bike route. And I would expect in Edina it would be the same way. People would be encouraged, and we would continue to work for on-road facilities. But for people that judge that they would be better off on a sidewalk, then they would be allowed, provided they bike safely. And what's interesting is people always say little kids should be able to ride on the sidewalk, but what I'm running into is a lot of adults, even very experienced riders, saying there are places that, I will not ride on the street. 50th up here by Highway 100, for example. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just for little kids, it's for everybody. So that's the recommendation to discuss next month.
Great.
Is
Yeah,
that-
let's
is that
put
good?
that on the agenda for
Okay.
next month. Thank you.
And then just one very quickly thing, I also emailed you a link to an article from Bike Walk Twin Cities on the TLC project and lessons learned. So that went out to their entire mailing list, and people are learning from Edina. That's cool. Yeah, it was good. Thank you.
Nice work. And thank you. Courtney, do you have anything else in the Transportation Options Working Group?
Sure. On our meeting 2 nights ago, we first spent our meeting creating a checklist of items, before we reviewed transportation options, we figured we should create a checklist of how we would review each item, required items, minimums, things like that. So we got a good list of 10 items, and then we proceeded to review my program, Prism Express, and the next time we're going to review the Beeline and Veeps volunteer driver program.
Great, thank you. Moving on to, did I miss anything here? Moving on to number 7, correspondence and petitions. Talking about the 2013 work plan. This is something that Wayne put in our packet toward the end of the packet. And this is something that's been done just this last year. We did one. I pulled up what Commissioner Genevieve pulled together for, we had more of a priorities, not necessarily a work plan, but for 2012. And I can see kind of bringing that forward. Is this something you're looking for us to develop over the next few months, or how are we to propose?
Yeah, actually, the Chair Nelson, the City Council is actually going to be reviewing the council work plan on Tuesday, or actually, last Tuesday, actually, they went through the work plan that they had developed during their retreat. And there's a lot of different components, and a lot of, actually, was a lot of projects that came out of this group here, you know, as like the TLC Bike Boulevard, the France Avenue Ped crossings, or to name just a couple of them.
They had the Living Streets, and yeah.
Yeah, the Living Streets was the other one.
Right.
And then the Safe Routes to School isn't on there yet, but so they went through and reviewed the status of those projects, and what their goal is to create a work plan for every year. So they're looking at what are we going to be looking at in 2013. So now is the time to get input into their 2013 work plan, which they'll be reviewing on September 18th. So this gives us a kind of a month to think about what we wanted, or what you want to do as a ETC group to submit to the council. So what I'd like to do is have this on your August meeting to go through with what you want to forward on to the City Council. And it's almost like taking your priorities and submitting them on to the council, and then the council will look at it and say if they're in sync with which direction the ETC wants to go with the priorities and how they fit into the overall work plan.
Okay, then is it appropriate that I would ask the commissioners here to email those to me, or email them to you throughout the next month?
That would be great, is to email them to either one of us, and then we'd put into a staff report to have a discussion at the August meeting.
Okay. I guess we'll move.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Chair. Can we get a copy of, I don't think I have a copy of the existing. Do we? I don't think I.
Yeah, I have a copy of it here, but we can certainly get you a copy. That was
email them out.
The priorities.
Yep. I'll email the priorities that you adopted with the ETC group, and then also I'll get a hold of the work plan that the council had too. It's to me, it's fantastic to share that with you, where they're at with all their different items.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Staff comments then. Director Hool?
Yep. What I have is tonight is on next Tuesday, the 24th. We're opening up bids for the TLC Bike Boulevard project, so it's to be excited to get that underway. We're also opening up bids that same day for bump outs along Wooddale that the City Council wanted us to take a look at. Our estimates are really high on those. They're around $250,000 just for the bump out. So we're open. We went through with the bids on them, and then hopefully I'll have a discussion at the council if they want to go forward with spending that kind of money on the bump outs at the intersections along Wooddale Avenue. The other one is, if you recall, the bike striping projects that you had adopted and prioritized along 70th and Cahill and Antrim and Valley View Road. We're be starting the striping on August 7th. On August 6th, we'll have a no parking resolution for Antrim Road just on one side that we need to put bike lanes on Antrim Road. But the rest of them we'll have combination of dedicated bike lanes, and when you get to the intersections, most of them will share the roads at the actual intersections. So kind of exciting to get that off the ground. And our Public Works staff will be actually doing that in-house. So that's all the comments I had.
All right, thank you. We should go through, it's not here, but we'll go through commission comments. If we'll just start at the end. If you don't have anything, you just say pass.
I would pass.
Thank you.
I have two things. One, I just wanted to note and apologize that I agreed to do an advisory communication at the last meeting and failed to get it done before this one. I will still get on that, but that was around the an ETC advisory communication for the evaluation of the 70th Street project for residents. So I will prioritize that prior to our next meeting. So I just wanted to make sure that folks know I hadn't forgotten about it. And then secondly, I wanted people to be aware that Hennepin County is in the process of developing a pedestrian plan. Currently, the county has a bicycle plan, but no pedestrian plan. And they actually reached out to me and hence to the Dewtown organizers, because they are pursuing a series of public meetings throughout the county and want to be sure they're tapping into existing engagement initiatives. And so for our three cities, in Bloomington, Edina, and Richfield, the organizers are planning to host at least one, maybe more, of the Dewtown supper clubs, specifically focused on contributing to the county's pedestrian plan. So they'll be reaching out to residents who have already indicated an interest in more sidewalk infrastructure and better support for pedestrians in the city, and inviting them to some sort of shared supper club dinner sort of thing. So I can let folks know when that's going to happen if you're interested in participating. But I just wanted to let you know both about the county's development of this plan, and that they thought to plug into that initiative already going on.
Okay, pass.
I have two. I'd like clarification on the back side of our agenda for the schedule of upcoming meetings and dates. For August, it says that our regular ETC meeting is Tuesday, August 16th, and we typically meet on Thursdays, and then it's the reverse there, Thursday, August 21st for the Transportation Options Working Group. I'm assuming that's a typo. Okay. And then my second one is to the group here. We had, I brought up the concern last time about that intersection at 58th and Chowan. I was told to invite the residents to this meeting. Then Jennifer contacted me, said, we're going to be too long. We should probably move it to the August meeting. Are we going to have room on the August agenda? It's getting full again. It sounds like to maybe bring up that intersection again and maybe invite some residents for their comments.
I think at the community comment period, that'd be fine. Sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Definitely.
I'll pass.
All right. Hearing nothing else, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.